What's going on, guys? It's Luke back here on a Wednesday for another PGA Tour video. I hope you guys are having a good Wednesday, getting some of your lineups together. I know I'm happy. I'm ready for my ownership reaction video and to give you guys my top 3 fades as well as my top 3 sleepers for this year's Rocket Mortgage Classic. In this video, we're going to be going over the guys that are a little bit overhyped going into this week's event. Those are going to be my fades. We're also going to be going over the guys I think are being overlooked. Some of my sleeper picks for this week. Some of the guys that are going to help you guys win all the money on Draftkings. So we're going to be using my database approach as always. If you guys are new to the channel, I have experience as an electrical engineer. I use a lot of the techniques, some of the tools that I've learned as an electrical engineer to help take on daily fantasy sports. I cover the PGA Tour, NFL, NBA, UFC, and even more. So if you guys are looking for database content, you're looking for just facts, not opinions, make sure to check out my channel. I have plenty of content for you guys. So without further ado, let's hop into my fades and sleepers, and let's see who the models are giving me this week. Hopping into my fades for this week, all of my fades are over $10,000 this week. I think there's some guys up top that are a little bit overhyped, that aren't the best course fits, and I think they're over $10,000 just due to positional scarcity, we'll say. Just a little bit of opportunity cost. DraftKings had to price some guys up, and these unfortunately are the 3 that I am fading. At number 3, we have Will Zalatoris, a $10,000 golfer who's expected to be owned in 15.2% of lineups this week. Willie Z is somebody that I'm typically very bullish on, somebody that absolutely stripes his irons, really impressed at the US Open and the Masters in his first appearance. And a lot of people like the guy. A lot of people love playing him in DFS. He's a very likable character, and it's very evident in his ownership numbers this week for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. My main issue with Willie Z this week is that his past form hasn't been the best. We haven't even seen Willie Z that much over the last month. His last performance out was a miscut at the US Open. He had a mediocre performance at the Charles Schwab, and those were his only 2 performances over the last month and a half. Again, we've only seen him twice. He was playing pretty much every single week for those first 10 to 15 weeks after that first US Open. So that's a little bit jarring for me. It's just not something that we've seen before. If we take a look at how he's been playing over the last 28 rounds, Zalatoris is losing 0.33 strokes putting, which is pretty typical for what we've seen from him so far in his career, but it's definitely not like he's been in good form or anything like that. The worst part about Zalatoris' game, and where I'm really worried this week at Rocket Mortgage, is his off the tee numbers. He's only gaining 0.14 strokes off the tee per round over that same span, and for Will Zalatoris, that is not going to get it done. He's somebody who hits the ball 315, 320 yards on average. He usually does it with relative accuracy as well, but we haven't seen that of late. We've seen him actually tone down off the tee a little bit. We've seen him hit some hybrids, some 3-woods, and he hasn't been accurate with them. He's still been missing the fairway. So for me, that's troublesome. He costs too much at $10,000, and if 15% of people are still going to be going to him, especially with all these unknowns, I'm not going to be there. And at number 2 for my fades, we have Webb Simpson, a $10,600 golfer who will be owned in about 17% of lineups this weekend for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. I have very similar concerns with Webb Simpson as the ones that I had with Will Zalatoris. He's somebody who doesn't really fit the golf course very well, and we haven't seen him very much over the last 2 months. If we take a look at the events that Webb has played over the last 4 months, this is a 4-month period now. He's played 3 times. His highlight was a 9th place finish at the RBC, which, again, that's some RBC Heritage, which is a course that is very, very good for Webb Simpson. He's had a lot of success there before. And he ended up following that up with a missed cut at the US Open. So for me, that is not good form. If you look at a lot of statistical models, even my custom models, he ends up ranking out well. He just has a very small sample size. He has that 1 9th place finish. But again, that was on a golf course that fit him to a tee. If we take a look at Detroit Golf Club, that's just not the case. I think length is going to be a huge advantage this weekend, especially given that there's not much hazards, if any at all, at the golf course. He's also somebody who's not been doing well on the bent POA surface, even over his entire career. Obviously, Webb Simpson's somebody who's a top 5 putter. He has been for the last 5 to 10 years, but on the bent POA surface, he loses 0.44 strokes extra per round on that surface. In fact, he's at a negative putter on the bent POA surface. So if Webb Simpson's coming in, he's lacking the length, he's going to be a negative putter, he has no chance. He's missing the cut. If he's being owned in 17% of lineups, it's a very, very easy fade for me. I don't understand how people are willing to play the guy when you haven't seen him. He's very bad on the surfaces, and he doesn't have the length. He checks none of the boxes for me. He's probably the easiest fade I've had in a very long time. And finally, for my number one fade, we have one of my favorite players in the world. Unfortunately, he's going to be a fade this week, though, and that is Patrick Reed, a $10,900 golfer who just doesn't have it this week. It's just not his type of event, at least in my opinion. If we take a look at his skill set, Patrick Reed is one, if not the best short game players in the world, if not of all time, to be honest with you. And Patrick Reed, as a result, is somebody who thrives in difficult conditions. He thrives at US Opens, he thrives at the Masters. Pretty much any event where you're getting a score that's 5 to 10 under par winning, he's going to be a huge favorite in those fields. He's also somebody that tends to do well at big events, at events where the pressure's turned up, events where the spotlight's on. I think Patrick Reed tends to relish those opportunities. This week at Detroit Golf Club, you get none of that. Not only is it going to be a birdie fest, there's going to be, not much up and downs at all. People aren't going to be missing many greens. You're looking at an event with little stature to no stature. The only really good players in the field are Bryson, you have Hideki, you obviously have Patrick Reed, Bill Zalatoris. But aside from that, you don't have any of the megastars. Patrick Reed isn't going to have the motivation that you typically see from him, especially at one of the larger events like the Farmers, where he won this year, Masters, where he contended, US Open, where he gave it his best effort. I just don't expect Reed to have that fire. I also don't expect there to be much up and downs. He doesn't really have the highest birdie or better percentage or anything like that. And I'm much more willing to play Patrick Reed at events that fall into that skill set. So for me, if he's being owned at 17% of lineups, it's just not worth my investment this week. Again, I'd rather use him at a more difficult venue. Something else to note about Patrick Reed real quick is that he's only gaining 0.21 strokes per round putting over the last 28 rounds. Patrick Reed's typically gaining 0.6 to 0.7 strokes per round with the flat stick, and if he's only gaining in the 0.2, even 0.3 range, that's not going to get it done. That is absolutely his biggest weapon. He doesn't have the off the tee game or the irons to make up for it, and as a result, he's pretty much my number one fade because I just don't see him making enough putts even if he puts himself in position. And again, I don't think he does. And now for my sleepers this week, the guys that are being a little bit overlooked that I think are going to do much better than the public thinks. At number 3, we have Matthew NeSmith, a $6,800 golfer who's going to be owned in less than 1.5% of lineups. That is ridiculous to me. Again, he comes in at one of the best iron players in the entire world. He is getting 0.67 strokes per round with his irons over the last 28 rounds. He's also giving himself plenty of opportunities off the tee. If we take a look at his numbers for the season off the tee, he's gaining 0.31 strokes off the tee and is doing it with great accuracy. At the beginning of the year, he was number 1 on tour in terms of accuracy off the tee and into greens with the highest green and regulation percentage. And while that has cooled down a little bit, he's still an elite tier in terms of accuracy in both categories. Something else that I really like about Matthew NeSmith is that he is a popper with the putter. He is somebody who putts to about a neutral rate typically. He has some good days, some bad days, but he has a few tournaments, I'd say 2 or 3 a year, where he goes out and gains putting for all 4 or even 3 out of the 4 rounds. And when he does that, he contends. He's just that accurate with his irons. He's going to be giving himself opportunities on seemingly every single hole. And all he really has to do is go out and make 3 or 4 nice putts every single day, and he's going to contend for sure. So at 1.5% ownership, I really like his potential, especially given that he keeps himself out of essentially all the trouble in the world with his accuracy. I definitely think he's worth a few ganders, especially on DraftKings. And for my number 2 sleeper pick, we have Sebastian Munoz coming in at $7,300. Going to be owned a little bit higher than NeSmith was at 3.5%, but I think he has even more potential than NeSmith does. If we take a look at the type of golfer that Munoz is, he's somebody who's been absolutely rolling his rock of late, gaining 0.77 strokes per round with his flat stick. He's also been doing great off the tee as well. He's gaining 0.3 strokes per round off the tee, a majority of that done with his distance, where he's hitting the ball on average 317 yards. That's approaching elite levels right there. But the main reason that Munoz is my number 2 sleeper pick is that he's a very, very good birdie or better percentage player. Last year on the PGA Tour, he was number 3 in birdie or better percentage on the entire tour. This year, he's in the top 15. He's number 13 in birdie or better percentage. But at $7,300, that is a huge value, especially at a birdie fest like this week. If we take a look at fantasy points and the correlation between fantasy points and birdie or better percentage, it is almost 1-to-1. The more birdies you make on DraftKings, the better you're going to do. Obviously, you have to avoid bogeys. You have to get some of those placement points to be an elite fantasy scorer. But when you're in the $7,000 range or even the $6,000 range, you don't even need placement points. You're really looking for guys that make a ton of birdies. You need them to get through the weekend at the very least. But with Sebastian Munoz, he also has some winning upside. We saw him win the Sanderson Farms last year. We've seen him finish in the top 5 4 times over the last year as well. And just with that high upside, he has some ceiling performances in him. And if he gets hot with the irons, that has been his weakness over the last 2 months. He's been losing a few strokes with his irons over events. But if he can come out, shoot neutral with them, or even gain with them, he could win this golf tournament. So I like his potential. I definitely like his birdie upside as well. And now finally, for my number 1 sleeper pick, we have Varner III, a $7,800 golfer who's only going to be owned in about 6% of lineups this week here on DraftKings. So Varner III, HV3, has been somebody I've had my eyes on for a while. He's one of my favorite golfers, great guy, really fun to watch. And he's somebody that I think is going to get his first PGA Tour win much, much sooner rather than later. I actually have an outright pick on HV3 this weekend. I think this weekend might be the time that he breaks through. But even if he doesn't come through and win, he could very well be an optimal play this week at Detroit Golf Club. We've seen plenty of ceiling rounds from him at the past. He shot 8 under twice at the Wyndham Championship. We've seen him play well at Quail Hollow, the Wells Fargo Championship. You just put up ceiling rounds. He does it seemingly at least once or twice a month. Here at the Detroit Golf Club, at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, I expect the winner to put up at least 1 or even 2 ceiling performances this weekend. And who better than somebody like HV3 who does it all the time? If we take a look at his skill set, it's no wonder that he's able to put up ceiling performances because he gains in all 4 major statistical categories. If we take a look at over the last 28 rounds, he's doing even better. He's getting more than 0.2 strokes in all 4 major statistical categories. Most notably, gaining 0.41 strokes on approach per round. This is one of the best iron stretches of his entire career. He's been locked in. I don't think I've seen him have a losing round on approach in quite some time. He's had a few neutral rounds, or at least close to neutral. But I really expect him to have some high upside, especially when you compare him to some of the guys in that high 7K range. You know, you have Brendan Todd, you have Doc Redman. Varner III not only has higher birdie upside, he has higher placement upside, he has better pedigree over his golf career, and he's coming in at a third or even a fourth of the ownership. So I think he's a slam dunk play. I'm going to have him in 30, even 40% of my lineups this week. I really, really think he has a good chance to win. And I don't say that about him very often. He's somebody I think that has much higher, top 5 or even top 10 upside. But this week at the Detroit Golf Club, I think he has legit chance to win. So that's why he comes in as my number 1 sleeper pick and why you should have him in some of your DFS lineups. That's all for this week's fades and sleeper picks for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. I'm going to be posting some NFL content over the next few days, few weeks as well, going over my top 24 players at each position. It's going to be a comprehensive list. I'm going to be going over all of my rankings to give you guys the best picks for your fantasy leagues. On top of that, this Friday, I will have an ownership reaction video coming out, this time about ownership in general. We're going to be going over how I calculate ownership, how players use ownership, and how you can make sure ownership is a part of your process to be a profitable DFS player. Make sure to check that out. It's going to be one of my best videos to date, something that you guys can watch over and over again, really teach yourselves about ownership, and get better as a DFS player. So look forward to that. Let me know in the comments who your best sleeper pick is for this week for a chance to earn a free month of my Patreon. I'm going to be picking 1 comment from the comments on this video to earn that. I have my PGA projections on there, my ownership update, my player poll, and even some game theory notes. So definitely take advantage and leave a comment to enter that contest. As always, make sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the content. It really helps me out with growing the channel. It also makes sure that you guys are able to catch my content as soon as I post it here in the future. Good luck with your lineups this weekend, and I'm going to see you guys next week for the John Deere Classic.